1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Scuba Confidential. It's Marcus here with my two friends, Mr. Ian.
Hello.
And Louise.
Hello.
We're back.
We are back, we're back again. So this is episode 19, or as Ian put it.
No, 19.
And if you're of a certain age like Ian, that will mean something to you.
What, 20 years ago?
It was longer ago than that, actually. It was
Not being confirmed.
It was a hit in the mid-80s, but this week we're back with a few other bits and pieces we're going to talk about. We've got some listener questions we'll get to very, very shortly. Lou is obviously here with the news on the world's biggest cave and calls for North Sea environmental protection. And we also were going to talk about a couple of other listener questions we had that kind of linked to that very, very slightly. The main topic of conversation this week is going to be part of our ongoing trilogy of building up to professional levels, and it's sort of the foundation of it, which is rescue diver, and we'll get to that in due course. Ian, you want to say something already?
Well, I was just going to say, I thought you were just going to say on the world's biggest podcast then.
The world's biggest podcast.
And then instead he went on to the world's biggest cave.
Yeah, the world's biggest cave, not the world's biggest podcast. That's Joe
But
Rogan.
nearly.
Well, I think we've got a few listeners to go yet, Ian, before we get to the world's biggest podcast. The first thing I was going to talk about is obviously we normally talk about what we've been up to. I'm not sure what you guys have been up to, but I'm just back from teaching some advanced open water students.
Cool.
And it was actually a really nice weekend. I worked with an old friend of mine, Paul Fisher, who I'm sure will listen to this at some point or other and harangue me when I next bump
Hello,
into.
Paul.
Hello, Paul. And that was a really nice weekend. In fact, it worked nicely for me because I got to sort of take a bit of a step back, really. Paul led the course. I was sort of semi in the background, acting as a dive master. And it's a really nice course to get involved with because it's that first step for people from that introductory level of open water to advanced open water, where you start to task load them a little bit, push them very, very slightly by getting them not just to move around in formation and do the basic core skills, but actually add some tasks to it, whether it's compass work or navigating around a wreck or going slightly deeper. So it's there was a few little nervous faces. There was a few kind of frustrated faces as well, particularly with the navigation. But it all worked out really well, and all the students did well. So,
And how did you get on being the dive master again?
it was odd because I really liked it. I like working with Paul. Paul obviously knows exactly what he's doing. But for me, I'm so used to doing the briefings and calling, OK, we're going to do this now, we're going to do that now. I have to sort of keep pinching myself not to keep jumping in and talking quite a lot of the time and just blabbering on. Like
Now you're seeing where the real work happens, you see, at the dive master level.
Well, I have to say it's one of the smoothest, easiest weekends I've had in a long time, with the exception of a little bump in the road with some navigation issues. With one particular student struggled to count, but that aside, everything was absolutely fine, and that student got it in the end. It was spot on as well, so it's all good.
Cool.
What have you been up to, Lou? You've been buying some new toys, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, yeah. So I treated myself to a set of Apex XL4 regulators
Nice
the
one.
other day. So I've not tried them out yet, but I will be over the next
All bright and
couple
shiny.
of weeks. Yeah, they're beautiful. So well, the bear got himself a new tech wing and a back plate. So, I got a bit of kind of FOMO, fear of missing out. So I had to have a little toy as well. So yeah.
Why not?
Really chuffed with those. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying those out. And we're still kind of like on the holiday hunting trail at the moment, which is good fun. So we're looking at various places, sort of Southeast Asia, Australia, places like that.
Well, perhaps you could, once you tried them, these new rigs, perhaps let us know.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll give you
let us
some
know
feedback.
how you get on with them.
Yeah.
Speaking of holidays and destinations, this morning I was just on our social media pages, and if people haven't been to our social media pages, you can go to Facebook, Scuba Confidential, Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're all over the shop basically. You can find us if you just type in Scuba Confidential. And there was one of the guys on there raised a question, Matt Rivett, who is one of the listeners, and he said he's off to Malta in a few weeks from now, and he was asking of any particular dive sites that I would recommend. And if you cast your mind back, Lou, many years ago, we went out there, and I think I did your wreck diving course out
did
there.
indeed,
It was probably
yeah.
a long time ago when I was...
2011.
Was it?
Yeah.
Good Lord. That time flies. And Matt was looking for a recommendation of any particular dive sites we'd recommend. Mm-hmm. And I was casting my mind back and thinking of where Matt is, because I know him. He's into his side mount and he likes wrecks. And the one that sprang out to me was El Faroud, which I think is probably the best wreck dive site in Malta.
Yeah.
It's a wreck that was scuttled off the coast in 1998 and has formed sort of an artificial reef. It's about probably about 15 metres to the very top of it and about 36 to the sea floor, and it's accessible via shore. It's quite a sizable vessel. It's about 100 metres long or so. We're not quite at Scapa Flow battleship size, but it's a big vessel, and it's because it's in the Mediterranean. Obviously, the visibility is very good. You get schooling barracudas, this kind of thing. My memory of the wreck, and there'll be someone out there who's listening who perhaps teaches or lives in Malta or dives there regularly, but my memory of diving that wreck was the entry is down this very, very steep slipway, fully kitted, obviously minus fins, otherwise it'd be a bit of a pain. And then once you're in the water, you then go along the coastline very slightly and then swim out into the blue. So it has to be timed well with current, and you have to know exactly which bearing to go out on, otherwise there's a danger you'll miss the vessel. But once you're out there, it's an amazing wreck to dive. So if I had a recommendation for Matt and for anyone who's at sort of advanced open water and above with nitrox, with that sort of 30-metre ceiling, you don't have to go all the way to the 36 bottom. If you're qualified to 30, you can level off at 30. And I found, on my memory of that was it was a really nice wreck to do. So there you go, Matt.
Sounds good.
Ask and you shall receive. You know, you contacted us on social media and we got back to you.
Hey, so this means we are interactive.
Well, we've been interactive for some time, Ian.
Oh, okay.
We have
Is this
you?
how it works?
Yeah. So people ask us questions and we try and respond.
So what we need then is more people to write in with their questions, ideas, things like that, and we're happy to help.
We're
Yeah.
all ears.
Keep them coming.
So, and on that point, if we can just say, just a little reminder to always leave us a review once you've listened to one of the shows. There's not now 19, and leave us a
Now
review.
19, is that like one of those album series? Is it?
Oh yeah. But always leave us a review if you can, and review, and just as a free way to support the show.
Yeah, all helps. Any positive ratings you can give us always sort of bumps us up a little bit, so that's always nice. There's a little news item I saw actually, which I posted on social media while we're talking about it, which was to do with retired oil rigs off the Californian coast. And the article, the basic premise of what was going on was that off the coast of California, there's 27 oil and gas platforms scattered along the Southern Californian coastline. And they're getting towards the end of their working lives. So they've served their financial purpose and they're about to be pensioned off effectively. And there's a debate over whether they should be turned into permanent artificial reefs for marine life, whether they would be something positive for the environment or something negative for the environment. There's a lot of debate on it. I'm not obviously an environmental scientist like that, but we did put it out there, and interesting that the comment that we did have, the first comment we had was from a guy called Dave Fox on our Facebook page, and he was really positive about it, and he said, could be a new destination for liverboards with the option for a permanent mooring point for boats above water, mixing up wrecks and reef dive sites. And then he's asked about, obviously, the logistics of it and what would be above the water and below the water and these kind of things.
That sounds like a really good idea, actually.
Yeah, my initial gut reaction to it was, okay, if these things are there, if they're not going to be, if there's a chance that they will do something positive for the environment, that's good. My slight hesitancy was, I don't know if they are positive for the environment. We all know that if something's left at the seabed, it eventually is sort of encapsulated by the surrounding environment, life forms on it, this kind of thing. We've all seen wrecks that are covered in various life, whether it's corals that grow on it or anemones and these kind of things, and they become a habitat for fish. But I don't know about the other aspects of it. I went and researched this very, very slightly, and there was a research team who looked into it and said that it was a really positive thing to do. But then I realised the research team were paid for by the oil company, and the oil company had worked out that it would be cheaper for them to dismantle them enough for them to be artificial reefs than to dismantle them completely and take them away. So my gut reaction is could be something positive, but I would want to see independent, conclusive evidence that they were something positive for the environment before I was willing to give it for what it's worth, my stamp of approval. Not that anyone cares about me over here in the UK.
Even though, say, artificial reef, are still humans having an impact on the natural environment.
Yeah.
Even though potentially a positive thing, but an impact's an impact, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. We had one more listener question that popped up, actually, and this made me and Lou laugh yesterday afternoon when it came in. There's a friend of the show, another Matt, actually, called Matt Ireland. Hello, Matt. He's out there. He's also an instructor. And he said, if a fish actually wanted to be touched, would you give it a stroke?
Hey?
Yeah, that was his question.
Really?
He questioned it. And I think the upshot of what has driven this is that he's currently in Portugal, I think. And what's up, Ian?
Well, how do you know a fish want to be stroked? Is it doing like a twerky type thing?
That
or
was
something
my
like that?
comment. Yeah,
That's
it's got
exactly
a T-shirt
right.
saying "Get it here."
Is it swishing its tail in a certain direction,
Yeah.
going, touch me?
Provocatively, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, how would you know the fish's intentions? What often happens, and we talked about this on the previous episode with the turtle coming to the boat I used to work on, they pick up these learned behaviours where they associate human activity with certain rewards, and they'll come and interact with humans in that way because they're expecting a reward in return. The thing is that the fish doesn't know that you having contact with it, whether it likes it or not at the time, has long-term consequences for that fish. Because it's not healthy for us to have physical contact with that fish and to encourage that sort of behaviour. So when I wrote back to Matt, I said, well, here's the thing. I wouldn't go and stroke the fish any more than if my niece wanted to, I would let her stick her fingers in the main socket for the electricity. Because just because she wants to do it doesn't mean it's necessarily good for her.
No.
And the same for the fish. The fish may want that human interaction and present itself like it would to a mate or to another fish when it's in a territorial squabble or something like that. That could be mistaken for wanting to be stroked or something like that. But the fact is, when you touch an aquatic animal like that, we are in danger of transmitting disease to it. So I would always say, put your hands away from the animal and just avoid contact wherever possible.
So do we know whether this said fish is being fed afterwards or something like that? So it's getting a reward for the interaction?
I didn't get that much detail because he basically sent it via a messenger from Portugal. So he just questioned this because he'd seen this interaction with a guide out there getting people to stroke this particular group or a wrasse or whatever it was. It's normally a group or a wrasse who come in for rewards and are fed eggs and this kind of thing when they're underwater. But my view on it was that. In fact, there was a really good example of that, and we'll put it up on our social media feeds, where there's a chap who's confronted with a manatee, a dugong type character, a mammal, and it's really curious about his beard, and it comes and approaches this guy.
It starts stroking his beard.
Yeah, essentially, it starts nibbling at this guy's beard, and the guy, because he knows that he shouldn't touch it, is really responsible. And he goes, do you know what? I'm going to resist the temptation to stroke this thing, and just puts his hands behind his back. And so there's this footage of this guy. He's got his snorkeling gear on, and he's got this sort of long, gingery beard, and he's being nibbled on by this manatee for about a minute and a half before he manages to
Teach him to have a beard.
Well, exactly, yeah. He's learned an important lesson there, isn't he?
Hipsters, God.
Yeah, going around with their check shirts, beards, and top knots.
That must get itchy. I always wonder that. Do you think beards often get itchy?
I think we're in danger of going slightly off topic here, talking about
If you can
Ian's
grow
beauty
one.
musings.
yeah. Yeah, back on the main highway,
Sorry, have we gone off subject? Sorry.
talking about the interactions with the animals. I was going to say that we're basically poisonous to these animals. The human skin's coated with oils and bacteria, which can damage the wildlife, such as corals and sea anemones, and these impacts are not immediate. So if you're touching these animals, they obviously don't know you're carrying those. Yeah, all right, MC Hammer. They don't know that you're potentially damaging to it, but you are all the same. Also, there are fish that are poisonous as well, and if you touch them, you're in danger of getting some sort of not necessarily infection, but a sting or an abrasion yourself. So it's just don't touch. Just don't. I don't know why people
Don't touch it.
just don't touch it. Here he goes. Bunky's answer to MC Hammer.
Yes.
So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
I think that's a fair comment. You know, like you say, a creature like a wrasse or potato cod or something, they're not.
That can't be a real name.
A potato cod?
Yeah.
Potato cod?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Northeast
We'll Google it for you
Australia.
later, Ian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Massive things. Yeah.
Really?
Beautiful
Yeah.
creatures.
It's like the
yeah.
size of
Why-
a coffee
you-
table.
Yeah.
So why is it called a potato?
Have a wild stab in the dark.
Does it
Ian.
really look like Mr. Potato Head?
Well, it doesn't have glasses and a little
I've
crack
never
on its
heard.
nose.
I've never heard the potato cod.
Have you not?
No.
Well, it's an education, isn't it?
Yeah. He's a dive master who hasn't heard of potato cod.
So next time I'm at the chippy, I'll ask, is that?
Yeah, I'm not sure we want to be
Like a
promoting.
bemused look.
We want to be promoting fish and chips consumption on a podcast about
Not that I
diving.
have fish and chips anymore. I'll just make that clear.
You're more of a battered sausage man, are you?
Yeah. I
So yeah, that sort of positive interaction ties in with something else that we were going to mention at this point. In that, on the previous episode, you may remember we talked about the Reef World Foundation and their Green Fins initiative, and I don't want to jump the gun too much, but we've been in conversation with that particular charity, and we're hoping to get a representative on in the not too distant future to have an interview with us and talk about
That'd be good.
positive interactions, how you can get involved with the particular charity, what they do, and this particular online course that we talked about earlier. So that's sort of an ongoing dialogue, and hopefully that will come to fruition and we'll have a representative on in the next few episodes. That's the plan anyway.
That'd be good to have them on.
So we're going to go on now and have Lou with the news.
So, in keeping with feedback from some of our listeners, Simon Daisley contacted us via Instagram a few days ago and asked if we've been watching the Undiscovered World series in the UK
Yeah.
with Steve Backshall,
Yeah, I'll do that.
who's a naturalist and explorer. And yeah, we've been watching it, haven't we, all
Yeah,
three
it's
of
good.
us? And it's absolutely fantastic. So, to anyone who's not seen it for whatever reason, it's basically a guy, Steve Backshall. He's very popular in the UK, goes to various places around the world, discovering sort of new territories, discovering new species. In this particular episode, he was in the Yucatan Peninsula, so in Mexico, and he was diving some pretty gnarly cave systems. So there's a two-parter we watched recently, and it kind of starts off, he's just getting the kind of feel of cave diving. Obviously, it's a very specialist area of scuba diving. And starts diving these cenotes, which are absolutely stunning. So they're basically sinkholes, aren't they, in the Mayan Peninsula? Yeah, fascinating
Go for
finds.
miles, some of them, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely, miles and miles. And obviously, the further the cave system goes, the more tricky and difficult the how you execute the dive gets. And I think at one point he was trying to get through this tiny crack in the rocks.
Yeah.
He had a complete whiteout, so obviously he kicked up a bit of the silt. Visibility wasn't that great to start with, I don't think. And yeah, it was really, I don't know about you guys, but it was really kind of like, I was really anxious watching it, you know?
I didn't realise that the air bubbles would cause so much disturbance with the what was going on above.
Yeah.
And that's bringing down so much debris and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was causing a lot of the whiteout as well, wasn't it?
And also the haloclines as well.
Yeah.
With where salt water meets fresh water. And that for me was really trippy to watch. It was, almost like it was pixelated underwater.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing for me, because I was thinking about, like, well, why are they doing it? Because surely one cave is very similar to the other cave. And then during the show, they were talking about the environmental issues because they're right above that, in that area. They've got a massive waste site, haven't they, where they deal with a lot of the population's waste.
Yeah.
And they're worrying about the breakdown of that waste, how that will seep through into the cave systems,
water system,
and the people who live in that area and the animals in that area, they all drink from that water. That all go through in the cycle of the water. And while they're going down there, they're also seeing if there's any elements of that waste, if that's seeping through into it, and which is that provides quite an essential reason to do it.
Yeah, that particular area of Mexico that they're in, sort of, around near Tulum, Playa del Carmen, that sort of area, is massively commercialised now with tourism.
Yeah.
And I've been there myself and seen it, and you've got these huge resorts that have been built in the last sort of 20 to 30 years. And like you say, it's only now that they're really starting to see how mass tourism is impacting on these areas of land that have been left completely untouched for centuries, essentially, and how it's affecting the water system and the very rare creatures that live in those caves.
Now you've seen it, would you do it?
Cave diving? No. Do you know what? I have to admit, I was too much of a sissy to even go in the cenotes.
Yeah.
I get a bit claustrophobic, and some of the systems can get a bit tight. I mean, the cenotes the bear went into, obviously it's an overhead environment, but it never gets to the point where they take regular tourists into a cave system. So as soon as you venture into that area, it's a very specialist area of scuba diving, and you have to have top-notch training by really highly skilled divers.
I think if it was a site where it's quite open to tourists and stuff to come and dive and experience it, I'd be open for it. But to go to caves that not been done before, not my bag.
When you're going to completely uncharted territory,
yeah,
and some of them are pretty tight.
Well, I think that was the thing with the programme was obviously some of the footage was really interesting, and seeing it all take place. First of all, one of the reasons obviously they're looking into these caves is because they are uncharted and no one knows what's down there.
Yeah.
These were considered as a gateway to the underworld or something by the Mayan people all these centuries ago when they populated the area, and no one's been in them. So it literally going into uncharted territory, like another planet almost. The other thing that I sort of stuck with me as I watched it was this chap Steve. He's done, hundreds of dives, perhaps thousands of dives, and he was really a beginner. As soon as he then went back into that side mount way of diving, into that cave spec of diving, he was very much a beginner, and he had to be retrained effectively by an instructor to go and do what he needed to do. And even then he was at the edge of his abilities and training and comfort, and that was exemplified when they had that whiteout with the silt, because much like wreck diving, if you make a mistake there's a high price to pay. So knowing how to tie off properly and how to negotiate those cave systems, you need a high level of expertise to do that. It's a million miles away from kind of some of the tourist routes.
The bit I couldn't work out about that whole show was that they cut the bit out of where they found the alien spaceship down there.
What? We've got what on earth is Ian on about this
That
time?
was a different show. You're on about Star Trek again, aren't
Oh, was
you?
it? No, but there must be something. I'm surprised they don't find something down there.
What?
Well, it could be anything. It could be like a new fish, new mammal. Because they're going to places that's never been found.
What's this
Never
alien
been
spaceship
explored
business?
before. Could be an alien spaceship down there. Who knows?
I don't know what's going on, listeners.
Yeah.
I think it's medication time for Ian. Moving on from that.
Are we moving on again?
Can we get the restraints for Ian, please?
Don't he'll like that.
All right, what other news you got,
On
Lee?
Thursday.
So, on the news items today, conservation groups have called for a shared area of the North Sea floor to be listed as a marine protected area. Calls to protect the so-called Brown Bank follows an investigation 2 years ago by Oceana and the North Sea Foundation as part of the Disclose project. Now, this study uncovered rare biodiversity hotspots, home to a diverse range of fauna, with some species that were previously believed to have disappeared entirely from Dutch waters. No measures are actually currently in place to protect the Dutch side of this area, which is intensively fished by trawlers. And obviously, as we know, trawlers drag heavy fishing gear across the seabed, which decimates anything in its path, any kind of sea life. Richard Aguila, who is the Ricardo Aguila.
Very good.
Yeah. The research director for Oceania Europe said, the discovery of worm reefs in the Brown Bank comes as a total surprise. These fragile habitats were thought to have been long extinct in Dutch waters, and due to intensive human activity, such as trawling and overfishing, it's absolutely imperative to preserve these living reefs. And if they're not protected, they will just continue to be heavily trawled, destroyed.
They'll be gone forever.
They will. And I think it's great that organisations are really standing up for these particular areas in the sea that otherwise will just go unnoticed. Governments need to step up and really protect these areas, and as well as that particular area around the North Sea, which isn't too far from us guys here in East Anglia, really, if you think about it. There's so many areas around the UK and around the world that haven't got protected status when they really should have.
That's one for the Brown Bank then.
It is.
Well, I think, I know we were making fun of being called the Brown Bank earlier, but
Are we?
a lot of these places, they weren't even aware existed. If you'd rewound the clock 20, 30, 40 years, these places, they didn't know existed. And they would have been trawling away merrily, destroying these environments. And now at least we've got these research groups. Whether they'll be listened to or not is a different question, but at least they have access to it and they can flag up some of these environmental concerns.
So investigations are still ongoing, and the North Sea Foundation, together with Disclose researchers, are due to return to that particular area for further investigations of the reefs. So hopefully, as well as their research and their findings, it will give them more kudos to go to the powers that be and say, look, this needs to be protected. Something needs to be done here before it's too late.
Yeah, I think it's that thing we were talking about a minute ago about people being unaware of it 20, 30, 40 years ago. It was out of sight, out of mind. It's the same if you make it analogous to the plastic pollution problem. People would just throw the bottle in the bin. And there isn't a thought that where is that bottle going? It doesn't even cross people's mind until they're confronted with documentaries and articles and websites and podcasts as well, that talk about these kind of issues and make them raise awareness about them. What else you got, Lou?
Jason Mallinson, Rick Stanton and Chris Jewell explored the Hang Song Dong in Vietnam. Yeah, I said that with a straight face. And found a new underwater tunnel connecting it with another major cave known as Hang Thong. Previously, the majority of the submerged tunnels had been relatively shallow, and the divers had been breathing air when they were exploring that particular area, which meant that they had to turn around after reaching a maximum depth of 77 metres. Jewell reportedly dived the terminal sump to 60 metres, with the other two divers searching for the way forward the following day, which was when Mallinson reached 77 metres. Jewell searched off the line and found the roof of the new tunnel at a new depth of 61 metres, although poor visibility made it impossible to officially determine the size of that cave area. The discovery adds another 1.6 million cubic metres to the system's already vast volume of 38.5 million cubic metres, so that's an increase of 4%. That's a massive,
it's huge.
Massive area we're talking about.
Huge.
The maximum depth attained makes Song Dong Vietnam's deepest cave dive and extends its length by 60 metres. Divers had to work in what were described as challenging conditions, which I can imagine, like we were just talking about with cave diving. And some of the dives required nearly 2 hours of decompression stops.
Sorry.
So that's really
serious stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty specialist diving. The team now plan to return next April, so in 2020, by which time water levels will be relatively low and visibility will be at its best, up to 2 metres.
6 feet.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So
it's not exactly a Maldivian dive in the Indian Ocean, is it?
2 metres visibility is considered the best.
Yeah.
So it gives you an idea of what these guys were working with. So that's pretty impressive stuff, isn't it? Hats off goes to these guys.
Yeah. Apparently this is right near Hang Long Dong as well. Sorry. How good was this?
I think it's absolutely fascinating stuff, like we were just talking about with the Undiscovered World programme. This level of diving is mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going into the realms of science fiction almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's on the boundaries of
it's
what's
incredible.
possible.
Not only have you got to be insanely brave to even consider venturing into these undiscovered areas, but the discipline and the psychological awareness and training involved
it's off the chart. I mean, these guys are elites in what they do, and I think it's for a layperson looking at it, it's really difficult to comprehend the kind of complexity of these dives and the sheer scale of the dives they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for us who perhaps do recreational dives, and perhaps we do a wreck dive and we go inside a wreck a wee bit and we tie off, or the wreck itself might be, let's say it's 50 metres in length, and we go down a couple of passageways and we come back out again. These guys, to give you an idea of scale, it says at the bottom of this article we've got the breakthrough. This is before the undiscovered bit. In 2010, they estimated that the cave system so large that a whole city block of 40-storey skyscrapers could fit inside it. So this is not your average cave dive, even for people who are trained in this particular area. This is massive. These guys are the best of the best who are doing this. And to do that and do it safely and successfully is a huge thing. So hats off to them. Is that it for the news, Lou?
That was the news.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thanks very much for that. Now, this week we were debating which topic idea to go with. We had a few. We were sort of spinning plates on and thinking about and trying to settle on one. And we reflected back that over the last couple of episodes, we've looked at becoming an instructor and the kind of the steps you have to take to do it and what makes a good instructor for preparing for your IDC and the kind of skills and attributes you might have. We've also looked at the Dive Master course, and we wanted to sort of complete that trilogy by looking at the foundation for all that, which is the Rescue Diver course. So the Rescue Diver course is a prerequisite before you even consider going on to a Dive Master level and beyond. So completing that threesome, I thought we would talk about the Rescue Diver course this week. So it's particularly pertinent because over the last couple of weeks, both myself and Louise's husband, the Bear, have been teaching Rescue Diver courses, and that sort of brought it into focus a little bit, because it is probably hands down the course that most recreational instructors like to teach the most, because you do get to push students for the first time, rather than being particularly, you're always nice to them and professional with them, but rather than helping them get their fins on and making sure everything's okay, you're kind of letting them be more self-sufficient and have an awareness outside of where they are. So the Rescue Diver course really is a pivotal step in expanding a diver's knowledge and experience, and you sort of train them to look beyond themselves and consider the safety and well-being of other divers. So that's why it's that prerequisite for leadership level training, and it expands basic problem solving and prevention and accident management skills that kind of starts in the open water diver course. So if you, even at the open water diver level, whether it's PADI or SSI or whatever, you're learning the basics. You're learning alternate air source and out of air procedures. You're learning cramp removal and these kind of procedures as well. And it just expands on that. It takes it a step further than you would learn at that level. And the course sort of focuses on the idea that there's no particular right way necessarily to do a rescue. There's lots of ways to skin a cat, so to speak. You know, you can approach it in different ways. And the environment you're in, the rescuer's relative size, the resources at your disposal, the number of people who are there to complete the rescue, all these things have a massive bearing on how you would complete that rescue. Just from what you've got in front of you, Lou, I mean, it varies, of course, from agency to agency, but we've got the course prerequisites here for the PADI version of the rescue course. So it's, obviously within SSI there's the stress and rescue course. Now we have a comparative course as well, so agencies vary. But just from the PADI point of view, Ian, you want to say something?
Well, I'm just wondering, so do you think they are quite similar then across the whole agency? So if you do one with PADI, you'd be qualified with like SSI and say RAID?
Well, if you cast your mind back to a few episodes ago, and we talked about sort of equivalency, when in training we were talking about the advanced open water course a few episodes back, and if you guys haven't heard that, you can go back to earlier episodes and have a listen. And most of the big agencies, the PADI, the SSI, the NAUIs, they all fall under the RSTC, the Recreational Scuba Training Council. So there is an equivalency amongst them.
Yeah.
So while there may be subtle differences in the skills, and some particular agencies teach things in a subtly different way, the overall prerequisites are laid down by the RSTC. So you can go to the RSTC website, you can download what they class as a rescue diver, what the minimum requirements are for that, and then each agency has to meet those. They can put their own kind of spin on those and other things that they think are specific to their agency's training philosophy, but there will be core things within each rescue diver course for those people, those agencies who fall under the RSTC. So an SSI one will be very, very similar to a PADI one, will be very, very similar to a NAUI one, to a RAID one, for example. When you get out into the club aspect of it, and associations like CMAS, it will be slightly different. But within PADI, what are the prerequisites, Lou?
You have to be 12 years and over, and for junior PADI adventure divers, they must have the underwater navigation adventure dive under their belt. PADI open water divers may participate in the knowledge development side of things and the rescue exercises in confined water, but they can't actually do the open water rescue scenarios. And you have to be EFR primary and secondary care trained within 24 months of enrolling on the rescue course. And you can do your training along with the rescue diver course, so even if you're not EFR qualified straight away, you can do it alongside the rescue course.
So the course says this focus on rescuing, offering first aid out of the water, so that EFR is a prerequisite. And as you said, Lou, often people will do the two courses side by side and be learning those CPR skills alongside a rescue diver training course. Yeah, so that's perhaps how you did yours, Ian. And a lot of people do it that way, and often you can't be signed off as essentially as a rescue diver until you have that CPR training, because it's part and parcel of removing an unresponsive diver from the water and administering CPR, oxygen, first aid as required. So you need those two qualifications together in order to do it. Looking at it on paper, you can see that you could go almost directly from an advanced open water level or an adventure diver, which is just below advanced open water level, with navigation spec, and go on straight onto your rescue diver training. So they're the bare minimum qualifications. So conceivably you could have someone who only has 10, 15 dives who's then looking at being a rescue diver. But from my personal opinion, and again, this isn't me representing any particular centre or agency or anything like that, I think it's such a significant step up that I always recommend to people some other prerequisites they should have and some other attributes they should have if they're considering being a rescue diver, because it is suddenly like moving up a gear in terms of their self-sufficiency, in terms of what's expected as a core skill level and confidence in the water. So what do you think, you guys think, how would someone know if they're ready to take the rescue diver training?
You need to be sure in yourself that you can handle pressure. So I think it's the first course where you really experience quite an intense situation in the water. So up until then, you'd have done your adventure dives, so maybe some specialities, navigation, wreck diving, which, not to trivialise them in any way, but they are very, this is how you do it. There's a good course structure, no matter what agency you dive with. But it is very much kind of diving by numbers, if you like. Whereas the rescue course, it's quite an emotional course. It's quite an intense course, and you're being faced with these situations and scenarios that could happen in real life. And I think the crux of it is you're learning how to save someone's life in the water. So you've got to be on top of your game as well as you think you are in terms of confidence, diving, you're, like you say, setting up your equipment and getting everything nailed and not having any kind of doubts in your mind about your capabilities as a diver, because you're going into a whole new area of diving and discipline.
Yeah.
So there's two things you guys have just brought to the table there. The first thing is Ian said about this changing philosophy, which I think is really key, where you start to realise that the diving's not all about you. It's about the group as a whole and the group's whole well-being, and being aware, conscious, and identifying potential problems and either before they occur or being able to make decisions and rectify them after they've blown up into something which you don't want to happen. And the second thing is that being comfortable in your own skin as a diver. And I think they're really, really key with the rescue diver course. It isn't just another course, because when someone is qualified as a rescue diver, speaking from my point of view as someone who would welcome people onto a boat or to a dive centre, if they check in and they say they're a rescue diver, there's a certain set of expectations as to their ability and their awareness and their self-sufficiency, where you never make assumptions, but you expect people to have a certain ability once they've got that. And if something goes wrong, either in water, on the surface, on the boat, that they would have a capability to deal with those sort of things, where perhaps you wouldn't with someone who's a newly qualified open water or advanced open water diver. If you think about the structure of the courses, it's really quite modular in the way courses are structured and taught, in that the open water course is going through those basic skills that everyone needs to know. So if you think of the PADI version of the open water course, there's 4 skills that are different in the SSI one, but in the PADI one, there's 24 core skills that people learn. And so by the time they've finished their open water course, they should know and be comfortable with, the official term is to achieve mastery, but their comfort level at removing and replacing their mask, at alternate air source skills, at buoyancy, body contact, these kind of core things, making safe ascents and descents, being comfortable in the water in that respect, and basic dive planning and navigation. Moving on from that, the advanced open water level, we're then task loading people. So yourselves, when you've worked as dive masters, then suddenly they're having to navigate you around a square area beneath the surface and bring you back to within a certain parameters. They're perhaps taking you guys around a wreck, and you're there just to monitor them and just for them to be aware of hazards, points of interest, where perhaps the ascent line is back from the wreck, this kind of thing. And it's building all the time and getting them to do 2 things at once. So by the time they arrive at a rescue diver level, you expect them to be comfortable with the core skills, to be comfortable with navigation, to be comfortable in their own skin in terms of, okay, guys, can you go and get kitted up, and not be coming to the various people and going, oh, what size BCD do I need, or does this mask fit okay, or I'm not sure about this. They should be comfortable in what they're doing and setting up their own gear, so that's all taken as read, and they're now looking at other people as opposed to themselves.
I think that's a really good point, because one of the things I spoke to somebody on a reactivate, and who had come back from diving from a dive and break for a couple of years, and they were looking to do their rescue course. And I said to them, one of the things I said to them was, is make sure you're, although they're past the skills enough to pass that course that night, is actually to get back in the water, make sure they are up to speed. That when you do turn up for the rescue course, you're very confident on how to set your equipment up, and it's just getting the basics done, isn't it? So I think that's a good, worthwhile.
I think it's even beyond that. I think it's the basics being done should be open water.
Yeah.
The basics being done and being able to do basic tasks is advanced open water. At rescue diver level, you should be able to dive it any which way. If you're stood at the side of a pool or the back of a boat, wondering which mask to wear and trying on different ones for fitting and getting a bit edgy about it in case it leaks, the rescue diver course really isn't for you. You should be able to dive it any which way, and at the drop of a hat, if someone calls for help, being able to put on the nearest available safe equipment, get in the water in a speedy manner without exhausting yourself, but as quick as you can, and being able to deal with that situation. If you're stood there going, I'm not quite sure about the fit of this mask, you probably shouldn't be on that course. You need to be confident in your own skin and being able to just go with what you've got. As long as it's safe, go with it.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial before you even think about enrolling on the rescue diver course that you've got a good knowledge of diving, a good range of experience of diving as well, and you've been around diving in general.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a course where, it's my personal opinion for what it's worth, I don't think it's a course that you sort of jump to, sort of hop from course to course. I'll do my rescue next, and it's there to be kind of grabbed and done. I think, exposing yourself to diving in general and knowing the logistics involved. So rather than just turning up for a dive, getting in the water and, like you say, having someone hand your mask to you and your fins and stuff like that, to actually be self-sufficient but also know what goes on in diving. If you go to a diving site or a dive resort, or you're on a dive boat, being aware of how things operate, because that can make you a better rescue diver, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult for us to talk about this without me giving away too many secrets of the course, but just as a little insight into how I try and change students' outlook a little bit. In the classroom sessions, we go over, obviously, various injuries. We talk about how to observe divers as they're setting up and look for signs of stress, both above and below the surface. And we talk about the importance of administering oxygen for the various injuries. And I always underline to them, wherever you go in the world, it doesn't matter where you go, when you're having the boat briefing or the site briefing, or you're at the back of the truck with a pickup truck, if you're in Malta or something like that, if they don't mention where the first aid and oxygen are, you're probably not diving with the right operation. And as a rescue diver, you should be asking that question, because they're going to look to you if something goes wrong to be able to help with this kind of thing. And if you don't even know where the O2 is and how it pieces together and how to administer O2, then it doesn't really click. You're not really living up to the rescue diver title. And then when we get to the open water section, I ask, or either myself or one of my colleagues will do the site briefing, and we'll deliberately leave out the first aid and O2. And when they come back for the first briefing for the first time, I'll say, what was missing from that briefing? And if I get a series of blank faces, go, I don't know what was missing, then it's like, okay, remember what we talked about in the classroom? You've got to be aware of these things. If you're going to be rescued, you've got to start asking these questions. If they don't mention it, go and ask people about where these things are. Because if it all goes wrong, they're going to be looking to you to help with these things. So it's just changing people's philosophy very slightly and getting them to take more responsibility, both for themselves and the dive group as a whole, rather than thinking, oh, it's the dive master's problem to sort this out, or the instructor's going to look after me and this kind of thing.
And when we talk about dive, and that does go wrong really quickly and unexpectedly as well, doesn't it? Because in the last episode, Chris was talking about how and you think about all the experience that he's got, and for someone like him to have a near miss like that, and so I think it's a valid point to say,
Yeah.
as a rescue diver,
Yeah.
where is the oxygen? Where's
Exactly.
that? Because you don't know when you are going to need it.
When some of that's going to happen, and just having that awareness in the water as well.
Yeah.
So when we on that last episode, and for those you haven't heard it, you can go back to episode 18, and Chris and Fern come in and talk about some diving in Socorro. And there's one particular incident where Chris had a problem. He had an equipment problem beneath the surface. The weights had become dislodged, and he suddenly found himself at depth, struggling to maintain neutral buoyancy, and we would head for the surface. And what was interesting to me and slightly worrying at the same time was that Fern noticed it and came to his assistance. She's a dive master and assistant instructor and spotted it. The guide came back. Where were the others?
Yeah.
They were all that level of qualification as well. So it's having that awareness of what's going on in the water and being able to kind of have eyes around you. It doesn't mean you have to look after everybody every time, but it means you have to just kind of be aware of what's going on and be able to prepared and ready to lend a hand if something begins to unravel.
And I think that is one thing you do get from that course, is that you get that training and understanding of looking around you, not having tunnel vision where you're just looking at just you and looking where you're going, but you're actually looking around you and spotting things like Fern did. She saw Chris had a problem, bang, she was there.
It's easy
It's
to
good
get in the
training.
mindset, I guess, for maybe people who so-called fair weather divers who turn up to resorts. They have a dive leader and they take them out, show them some nice things underwater, and they get back on the boat and then go back to the hotel. If you get in that mindset, it's then difficult to have a wider view and to, kind of your perception to risk and handling situations, like you say, reading situations. It makes you a bit closed to that.
Yeah.
So certainly you need to have a broader kind of broader understanding, I think, of, like you say, reading situations.
Yeah, some of that we talk about within the rescue course, and we'll just very quickly talk about the structure of it. We're not here to sell rescue diver courses, but just to give people an understanding of how it all pieces together very briefly. Within the classroom, we look at concepts like perceptual narrowing. So as a diver becomes more stressed, as they become more anxious, they tend to focus on one thing that's bothering them to the complete detriment of everything else that's going on. So maybe one of their fins has worked loose and they've become stressed by that beneath the surface, and they're so flustered by their fin strap working loose that they've completely lost control of their buoyancy and have paid no attention to it, and suddenly they're 1, 2, 3, 5 meters deeper than their buddy is without even realizing, because they're rolling around trying to sort their fin out. Whereas a rescue diver hopefully would have the wherewithal to stop, breathe, think, act, pause, adjust their buoyancy, signal that they've got an issue so someone can come and help them and try and be self-sufficient in dealing with it, or stay calm and ask their buddy to help them while they maintain their buoyancy.
It's being able to react to a situation rationally rather than emotionally, which then leads to panic.
That's right, and these things can escalate quickly. So there's that in terms of how you would act as a rescue diver, but also there's how you would observe it in other divers. So it's trying to get people into that mindset of, as we do when we're acting as instructors or dive masters, when I always say to dive masters who are in training with me, because obviously this is something they pick up in the rescue course, you should have your equipment prepared, ready, and be there observing your students putting their equipment together, because this is your magic moment to look at them, see how they're interacting with each other, see who looks a bit stressed, who's fumbling a bit with their equipment and asking questions of their buddy, is one stronger than the other. All these kind of little telltale signs help you build a picture of the people you're about to be getting into the water with. So you need to be there, have that awareness of what's going on, and always have your senses open to see what's happening with other people who are in your dive group. The structure of the course itself, essentially, after the theory side of it, which varies from agency to agency, within the PADI system, there's 10 rescue exercises that are completed. So each one forms part of a larger jigsaw where you look at distressed divers on the surface, beneath the surface, unresponsive divers, responses from shore, responses in water, administering breaths, doing search patterns, all these kind of skills. And then the course tends to wind up with a few scenarios to do. So you'll be thrown a series of problems to deal with, and as a group acting together, resolve that problem until the moment of safety, where all of the mock-up victims are back, either being treated or they've been found, or wherever the closing part of the scenario is where the instructor tells you can pause now and it's completed. So it does put people under pressure to, for example, to get into their gear quickly, to do buddy checks quickly, to enter the water quickly. And with that comes that familiarity that you were talking about with equipment, and also that fitness that we tend to harp on about on various episodes, because of course if you're out of shape, being able to get into the water quickly and respond to problems and get out to deal with them quickly is an issue. And one of the things I like to do with the response from shore is have someone who's got an issue, perhaps they're, I don't know, 30, 40 feet away from the shore, maybe slightly more, and have someone mask fin, snorkel, trying to get in the water, respond, get out to them, to the point of providing them with some buoyancy aid and calming them down within a minute or so. You need to get out there quite quickly and do that. If people can't do it as quickly and get into their equipment quickly and get out and deal with it, then we have to repeat it until they can, essentially. So it's not going to be effective as a rescue. What do you guys remember of your rescue diver courses?
Well, I did my rescue, it was 5 years between doing my open water course and my advanced open water diver until I even considered doing my rescue course, because I wanted to get plenty of experience, plenty of knowledge of diving. My memories of it were that it was tough, it was challenging.
The instructor was awful.
Slave driver. It was the bear, by the way. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can hand on heart say it's the most rewarding course I've ever done.
Wasn't it from there when you then thought about doing your dive master as well?
That's when I started to consider it,
Yeah.
give it some serious consideration.
Yeah.
Because that's when I started thinking about maybe I would like to do the dive master mode, because I really enjoyed doing what I learned. There's so much information and skills that you learn, such as CPR and things like that. And I remember just being out kayaking as well, and when I went out kayaking a year or so before, I didn't think about so much about, could I actually get back on if I fell off the currents or this sort of stuff, and how would it, about location as well. And then after that course, I started using what I learned on that to when I was out on the sea on a kayak,
Other pursuits,
and you bridge across as well, and also with the training side, I thought that was so good because everybody got involved. The instructors were really good. Everybody got involved, and it was a busy day. But I remember on some of the exercise, my heart was absolutely pounding. Because
the adrenaline kicks in,
because
it?
There's somebody struggling in the water or they're unconscious, and it's down to you. You've got to get them in, and you've got to get there. You've got to get the emergency breaths in as well.
It's a very physically and mentally demanding course, and emotionally.
Yeah,
and that's what I would also say to anyone considering doing their rescue course, is that I think you have to be ready in yourself to deal with, and I know it's kind of pantomime, but the scenarios when you're thrown into them are very intense, because the whole point is they're supposed to be replicating a serious incident, whether it's someone panicking on the surface or a missing diver, and you have to go in there whilst remembering your training but also being unfazed by what you're being confronted with, and to execute that particularly well while you're being assessed. So there's a lot of so much to deal with, and I would go as far as to say it's quite an emotionally challenging course to do.
I would say on 50% of the rescue diver courses I've taught, it doesn't mean people have failed the course or anything like that, but there's often someone who is taken to the edge of their comfort zone, and I either have to not rescue them, but perhaps end up towing them back to shore, or they have a little tearful moment where they're pushed to the edge of their comfort zone. It's fun, don't get me wrong. It's not like we're going to boot camp, but people should be pushed, in my opinion, to the sort of boundaries of what they're comfortable with, because so that they know how they will react and how they can react if it happens for real. One thing that I would say about it being the foundation for leadership level courses is that if your instructor's good, they'll be looking for potential dive master candidates within that course. And one of the little markers for me is, do they realise that this isn't something you just switch off when the exercise is finished? When you've done this, you do it indefinitely. You are a rescue diver for life. There is no off button. And one of the things I look for is, I remember this vividly on one course I taught. I can't remember if it's this year or last year. I was like, okay, guys, we've done our, we've completed this particular exercise. Let's just break for lunch now and get out of the water. And I'm always first in, last out of the water. And as I was coming in and just like a sheepdog at the back, as I normally do, to make sure everyone's back to the shoreline safely, there was one particular student who was struggling, sort of rolling around trying to get their fins off. And I just waited, because there wasn't any immediate danger. They were in sort of shallow water where they could stand up if they had to. And the other candidates just took their fins off and walked out of the water and left this guy floundering there, thrashing around in the shallows. And eventually I went over and helped this guy get his fins off. He found his feet and got him in. And I said, what happened there? They said, well, you said the exercises were finished. It's like, well no, that doesn't mean you can just leave someone who's struggling. The idea is that these are preparing you for these very incidents.
Yeah.
So there is no off button for this now. If you see someone struggling, that's your responsibility now. So had there been someone who'd noticed that and spotted it and then gone over and dealt with it instead of me dealing with it, I probably would have gone, I need to have a chat with them about the dive master course afterwards, because they're the sort of person I would look for as a candidate.
It's training you to deal with being first on the scene of an emergency.
Yeah.
And like you say, Marcus, if you feel that you won't be able to handle or cope with being a rescue diver who has to go and search for a body potentially in the water, I've seen scenarios for real, and they're distressing to watch as a bystander. And if you're a rescue diver, people who are helping in the water are going to be calling out, we need a rescue diver. And you've got to step up to the plate and switch off and get on with that, just like a paramedic would.
Yeah.
So I don't think, it's a course that should be sort of considered on a whim necessarily.
No.
I mean, the courses vary depending on where you are in the globe. They're going to be tough wherever you go. If they're properly conducted, they should be sort of challenging but rewarding as well. That you should be pushed, but you should feel really satisfied and proud with what you've achieved at the end of it. That's the sort of aim when you're teaching these courses. But they can be tough even in what would at first glance be a simple environment. Say if you're in warm water, tropical water, something like that. It just means that the bar is raised in terms of the challenges, or the missing diver might be something smaller that's further away to do a bigger search pattern for, something like that. But they're not like for like. So a rescue course that you've perhaps done abroad isn't going to be the same as a rescue course that's done in the UK or Canada or the States or something like that, where the conditions are more challenging. So they're not precisely the same, even though the same core performance requirements are there. So if you're moving from environment to environment, it's worth just kind of being aware and refreshing your skills slightly.
And that's from a teaching perspective as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
how you would teach that course would differ,
Yeah.
not just the student.
Exactly right. How I would teach a rescue diver course if I was back living in Cyprus or Thailand would be entirely different to how I would teach it in a lake or quarry in the UK, because there's different challenges and you have to make it realistic for the environment you're in. So something as simple as a search pattern, when I'm conducting a course in the UK, often the go-to search pattern for low vis is that expanding circle search pattern. There would be little value in doing that in a sandy bay in Cyprus, because
Oh, look, there they are.
exactly, because you would choose your search pattern depending on the environment, the visibility, the topography. All these things have and the skill level of the people you've got. So all those things have a bearing on how you conduct the course, the skills you focus on when you're teaching it, and that's part of being an instructor, is just adapting the course for the environment and the students you've got with you. I think in terms of preparation for the course, as you guys know, fitness is always key for that, being able to respond quickly. And you do have people who get themselves in a bit of a pickle, shall we say, where perhaps their fitness isn't where it should be when they're doing these sort of courses. Having your skill level there. So those 24 core skills, but also all the other stuff that goes with being a good rescue diver. Like you need to be competent and comfortable in, for example, deploying an SMB, in navigating and using a compass so that you can undertake a search pattern if you need to. All these kind of things need to be comfortable and competent before you take that step, because on a rescue diver course that's not going to be retaught how to do these core things. whoever's teaching the course will expect you to be comfortable with those and not be worried if your mask is slightly dislodged, because you can just reseat it and clear it, for example.
Yeah.
That's where you should be. Do you guys have anything else to add about rescue diver training before we wrap this up?
No, other than, like I say, it's a really rewarding course, so hopefully we haven't scared people off.
No, don't be scared by it. It is a fantastic course.
It needs serious consideration, I think, before you think about enrolling in the course. And there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of potential baggage that comes with being a rescue diver. If you're thrown into an emergency situation and you're the one who has to go in and, do a search pattern for someone or try and help someone on the surface or underwater, then I think you need to be emotionally ready to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, as I said earlier, it's going to be challenging, but rewarding as well. It will change completely your perspective on diving and how you observe other people on boats or quaysides or wherever you happen to be. And do it when you're ready to do it, and it will be huge for you. So it'll give you a sense of confidence, hopefully, that you can look after friends or family if you're diving with them, and you'll have that, hopefully, that quiet confidence about you when you're on a boat that you're observing and you're aware of the situation. You don't feel like such a passenger in whatever's going on the boat. You're actually involved and you can understand what's happening.
And it's surprising the things that you do see once you've done your course. And you think,
It opens your eyes up to things, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And I second everything that you guys have just said. It changed the way I looked at diving and how I was in the water. And if you think it's right for you, that you're at that right stage, maybe speak to your instructor who initially done your training and things like that, and see where you are. Yeah. And I totally recommend it. Yeah, it's brilliant course.
Yeah. That's pretty much it for this episode. Just as usual, just want to plug our Patreon page. So if you'd like to get involved a bit more, if you'd like to help us make more of these, you can go to patreon.com/Scuba Confidential, and you can get as involved as you want to. You can make a financial contribution to help us make more of these episodes. Over the coming weeks, we're going to try and concentrate on getting some guests in. So we're going to be going out and trying to make contact with some people that we know within the industry and within the diving world to get them in to talk about things. If there's a particular burning subject you'd like us to talk about, if there's a particular guest or type of subject you'd like us to try and find an expert in a particular field for, do get in contact with us. You can email us at scubaconfidential@gmail.com and we can try and find someone. I'm sure between us we will find someone who can answer questions.
Drag them in.
Yeah, whether it's tech diving or whether it's environmental issues or whether it's free diving or whatever's on your mind, do just get in contact with us and we're happy to see what we can do to make your dreams come true.
Yeah. And don't forget to rate and review us.
Yeah, rate and review. Yeah. This is Ian's catchphrase this week. Rate and review. Okay, and on that, I think we'll leave it for this week. I think we'll leave that there. Yeah?
Awesome.
We're going to leave that.
We're going to leave that there. So thanks for listening if you made it this far, and we'll see you for episode 20. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Scuba Confidential. We really appreciate you tuning in today. We'd like to clarify that we're in no way affiliated with any agency or organisation. All opinions expressed during this podcast are our own. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at ScubaConfident1, Instagram and Facebook at Scuba Confidential, and if you'd like to support us via Patreon, go to patreon.com/Scuba Confidential. Any contribution is really appreciated. Additionally, if you have any suggestions for topics or discussions, just let us know at scubaconfidential@gmail.com. Many thanks to Plunkett Music for the groovy tunes, and we'll catch up next time. Until then, keep diving.